This week, Kumar and I resume our discussion of Kentaro Miura's Berserk with volumes 5 and 6. How come Guts' flashback is so much more realistic than his present? Just what is it that Miura is taking so long to get to? Is the flashback the real story that Miura wanted to tell, rather than Guts' present? Our talk was, luckily, recorded before I caught the cold that did this to my voice. We hope you'll spread the word about Deconstructing Comics. Tell your friends about us, share episodes on social media, and also send us suggestions for topics we could cover. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com.
This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
All right. So, we decided to keep going on Berserk. We did the first 4 volumes in an episode last April, and kind of imitating what Emmett and I have been doing, like marching through all the Jack Kirby DC stuff. So we thought, I'd like to keep reading it, so let's do some more of it. Now, we're only going to do 2 volumes this time, volumes 5 and 6.
Yeah.
And this is still kind of the early days of this long flashback sequence.
Yeah, I think it's going very long. I have a feeling, I'll say right off the bat, I've been enjoying it a little bit less, the flashback stuff, because I think it's it's not straight fantasy. It's just medieval politicking kind of stuff. There's no fantasy element. There's only one fantasy element, which we will talk about in detail when we get to it. But it surprised me. I really felt like I was kind of joking that it seemed like in the first 2 volumes 1 and 2, he was pulling the wool over our eyes to give us this flashback, which was more sane, by giving us this insane demon fighting stuff for 500 pages, 600 pages, and really that's even more so now. It seems like that was just a ruse to get readers to come on board, and then he was going to whip the curtain away and reveal that the real story was going to be about all this stuff that was happening 30 years earlier, and there's no magical stuff happening at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Puck is nowhere to be found. He hasn't met her yet and won't for many years.
Yeah.
Well, he, of course, is Guts, the main character of this story. And so all of this is now, he's with the Band of the Hawk, which is led by Griffith, who, we know from the early part of the series is going to do something that will kind of estrange him from Guts. And
more than that, he's going to become a Cenobite. He's going to become a full-on interdimensional hell being.
Yeah, he'll join the God Hand.
Somehow, yeah.
And apparently, there are hints in these 2 volumes. Like, apparently it has something to do with the egg of the king. That I called it. Yeah, I called it before the Picasso egg.
Yeah. That was a moment early on in volume 6 where we see the necklace, and it's like it's a crazy moment, because I don't know if this series is genius or poorly structured or what it is, but we come into this long flashback sequence, which is thousands of pages, right?
Yeah.
So we've had a bit of an introduction with all the demon fighting kind of stuff. Then we get into this, and Guts' personality was so hard and cruel. There's one moment in the early volumes where he seems a bit sad about a girl that's going to be... Like, he leaves her to her own devices and walks away, but then we get a close-up of his face, and he actually has a look of sadness on his face, even though he didn't act that way before he turned his back on them. I can't remember what the exact moment was, but it was like there was a moment of emotion there, which he hid from everyone else. But he's constantly this very hard, calloused character. And then we get this weird moment here about 50 pages into volume 6 where he gets in a water fight with Griffith. And they're splashing buckets on each other and having a bit of a laugh. And I'm like, this is bizarre. But then suddenly you get slapped with the Behelit necklace. And it's a really amazing moment where Miura reminds you what we're about. It's like very deliberately he's distracting you with this water fight, this ridiculous water fight, which seems out of character. And then suddenly it's like, aha, don't forget about this thing here. But then even that moment was very bizarre when he notices, because it's a very homoerotic scene. Griffith is completely nude this whole time. And but the one thing he's wearing is this necklace, and he says that he bought it from a gypsy, a traveling gypsy. So I don't know if we're going to get more backstory there. That fascinated me too. Like, how did he end up getting it? Like, was this fate that led the Behelit into his hands? But we know this thing opens international portals, I almost said.
You can get home really easily with that.
Yeah.
Get back to Canada.
He shows it to Guts, and the thing has a closed eye, but the eye opens. It seems to open.
Yeah.
And Guts is like, whoa, it's almost like it's alive. And I'm like, this thing opened its eye. Like, that reaction was weak. Like, this is a serious thing. If I saw this thing open its eye, my reaction would not be, it's almost like it's alive. It would be like, how did it do it if it's not alive? What's the mechanism that caused this eye to open? It's a very freaky thing. But I did find it structurally, again, fascinating how he swaps his strategy seems to be to swap around on you, to surprise you by juxtaposition of scenes that you're not expecting to come together sometimes. But then sometimes it's just the relentlessness of it, like all those 3-year flashbacks that we had at the start of this period.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But there's some, like, jokey stuff in here, like when they get pushed into water, like, by this opening door. There's, like, some slapstick.
Yeah.
It's a bit all over the place.
Well, yeah, I mean, after reading the early volumes, you don't expect that kind of thing at all. It's like, a funny scene from Little House on the Prairie or something. Like, what's this doing?
Exactly.
Well, remember that, what was it, on Wikipedia, it said that it was a comedy, so now we're seeing the evidence
of it. I never would have. I think somebody hacked that Wikipedia page, because I never would have categorized it as a comedy, even with that few moments of humor in there. Like,
right, yeah, that doesn't really make it a comedy. Just a few light moments, but all the blood and gore is not that funny.
Yeah. I will say another thing I noticed immediately was the battles are harder to follow, I found. Now, he has his armor design is great. His helmets are great. I love all the helmets on all the characters. Everybody's got a different helmet. But you got to keep track of them. You got to remember, this is the guy with the kind of grate on his face, and this guy's got, like, the wolf on his armor or something. You got to remember all those little details to figure out who's fighting who. Otherwise, you tend to get a bit lost, because you don't have just dudes fighting monsters, and it's very clear that's the monster and this is the human, and they're against each other.
Sometimes I can't even quite tell what's happening. Maybe I know who it is, but what's he doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, some of those big battle scenes, I would just kind of like, flipping through it kind of quickly, because I couldn't.
Yeah, me
it's
too.
Just fighting. This is fighting,
yes.
Okay?
And it's kind of missing a bit of the juice of the grotesque monsters, and like, so it was so over the top, and that's kind of missing here. And even the, we talked about it when we talked about 1 to 4. There's a real sense of weight in the armor and stuff, and when they swing hammers, and those, even then, in those early volumes, the fights between two humans who were heavily armored had a real solidity to them, and you can still follow them. And I found this time it was a little bit harder to follow, and there was less interest in the fights, in terms of there weren't as unique things happening, like a guy swinging his hammer and accidentally hitting his own men, but not even noticing that he was doing it. Like, that was something that would happen. But there's nothing that kind of crazy in this one. It's more straight. In fact, it's so straight that the Guts' ridiculous oversized sword it's just that. We just accept it as part of the fantasy world that he exists in. But in this volume, we get a scene with him training with a weight on his sword. He's mounted some sort of weight like almost like a medicine bag onto his sword so he can swing it. And it's like, oh, we're supposed to take this seriously, like it's a realistic thing that he's going to be. This is the path he takes to be able to wield that massive sword. It's very straight, if you know what I mean. It's not. There's no ridiculousness to it like there was.
Right, yeah, where he was swinging it with his mouth or something. In the
like that kind of stuff. It's like, well, that's never going to happen no matter how much training you do, but you just accept it as part of the over-the-topness that is pervasive in the series.
It's a Chuck Norris joke.
Yeah, exactly. You'll just okay, I buy it. The whole series is crazy. This is just one more crazy thing in it, and it's fine. But here, it's like, oh, now he's actually training in a way that we're supposed to, like, that's supposed to be believable, what happened earlier? I don't think so. I don't think it's ever going to get to.
Well, I mean, of course, this is flashback, so he works up to the ridiculous stuff in the present,
Maybe.
I guess.
Is it going to work? I'm really fascinated. I'm really interested to know whether you can actually tie these two ends together. Is it going to be a smooth transition, or are we going to have Revenge of the Sith leading into A New Hope and it not making any sense?
But you're right, this flashback is moving awfully slowly. I mean, there are hints here and there about, the nature of Griffith. People talking about how, he's somehow different from everyone else, and the Band of the Hawk is different from other mercenary groups because they're able to somehow experience a range of emotions and not just thinking about money and their own survival. And yeah, that one really supernatural type scene that we'll get to reveals something a little bit, but all this stuff with Guts and Casca, the one woman in the band, and Griffith and Princess Charlotte. I'm not.
Minister Foss. Don't forget about Minister Foss,
right.
who's double dealing and trying to set these factions against each other so that he can take over or something. I don't know quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, he's really taken his time with it and telling stuff that you don't need to know at all to understand what happened in the first two volumes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, I mean, the flashback you would think is supposed to explain what you saw at the beginning before the flashback, and it's doing that, but it's throwing in a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I guess this is all this kind of literally like palace intrigue, where Minister Foss is pulling these wires from behind the scenes and setting people against each other. It's also, it's similar to Game of Thrones kind of things, which is I would be very surprised if Miura was familiar with Game of Thrones, but that kind of stuff seems to come right out of it. And I did accuse him of being very derivative of other works when we talked about 1 to 4. When I reread them for this episode, I was like, it didn't hit me quite that bad. I think I'd gotten used to it. I think I was living in that world a bit more, that it would just belong to that world, and I just kind of accepted it. But this time I was like, oh, this is kind of a bit Games of Thrones-like, but it's somehow lacking the drama of it. But then, so then they're in this battle. They're raiding a castle or whatever as usual. And then there's this guy in there who's a killing machine that nobody can beat. And they're like, don't go in there, Guts. Don't try to fight him on your own. His name is Nosferatu Zod, which is a great name for a character. I love it. And he goes in there, and then it's really baffling. But he has a very long fight. I'm saying 50 pages maybe against Nosferatu Zod, or longer. And so he's just this really massive guy who's completely butt naked. He's killing tons of people, but then as he gets into this fight with Guts is finally a challenge. This guy hasn't had a challenge in a very long time. He's impressed.
Yeah, he's impressed with Zod, and he can't believe what a good fight he's having with Guts, and he does. Yes. Of course, he still expects that eventually he's going to kill Guts, but it's harder than usual, so it's interesting for him.
Yes, and then he turns into this cloven-hoofed demon. And Guts says monsters like this can't exist. Now, so we've been, I guess, a few volumes into the flashback. And so far, there was no clue that magic didn't exist in this world, if you know what I mean. And this is part of the problem I think we're going to have a New Hope sync-up problem here. Because when you read those first 3 volumes, magical stuff seems to happen all the time.
Yeah.
And nobody says, oh my god, how can this exist? It's not like Guts is saying, has to explain every time, there are ghosts in the world, or something like that. People just see monsters and ghosts and they're like, oh, okay, run away. They never say, how is this possible? So we're in a situation here where we have flashback, which is maybe 10 years in the past, 15 at the most. I don't know how old Guts is in the present. But how are we going to go from a world where nothing exists, no magic exists, to the point where people would say monsters like this can't exist, exact words out of his mouth, to get to the point where it's just very common across the whole world, so that nobody blinks an eye at it?
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me of what, like improbably, like in the Marvel Universe, it seems like, well, maybe they've kind of grown out of this because they had to, but it seems like there's all these normal people who never encounter superheroes.
Didn't Bill Jemas, wasn't he the one that said that people in the Marvel Universe don't believe in aliens? Like that was like canon. People who live in New York, in Marvel New York, don't believe in aliens. I'm like, how? So maybe we're going to get something. But there's also, even rereading it, there was a moment where Guts says in like volume 1 or 2, he says, after you're dead, that's it. He says those exact words. That is contradicted again and again, page after page. They meet ghosts, spirits, people go to hell. That's not it. Lots of stuff happens after you're dead. It's not the end. And I don't know how he didn't know that, because he's dealing with these ghosts all the time. In fact, he knows that ghosts are going to appear. As soon as he sees one of these weird spirit things, he's like, uh-oh, the ghosts are going to come back to life. So why is he saying that? So I don't know if this is Miura being unspecific. Like he's not really, this isn't that important to him, maybe this type of detail. Or maybe there will be a level of world building where the world is going to be transformed by magic by the end of this 17-volume flashback, or however long it is.
Well, that could be that there might be something changing during the flashback. Yeah. Or I was thinking about it just been that Guts is sort of introduced to this magic world, becomes more aware of it somehow, where he couldn't see the magic before or something.
Yeah, I agree that would be possible, but the problem is, what about everybody else in the world? Because it's going to be it seems like magic is normalized. Maybe I'm misreading those scenes from volumes 1 and 2, but it seemed to me that people were not reacting to ghosts and things in a shocked way at
just
their
kind of
very
like, it's a ghost.
It's a ghost. Run away. It's not like,
or hi, ghost.
What? Yeah. Because right now what we've got is like not medieval fantasy, just like medieval times. And as I said, palace intrigue and that kind of stuff. And this one monster appears in these 2 volumes. And the rest of it is, as you said, there's like conversations in this. We didn't really have conversations about people's feelings and emotions in volumes 1 and 2. And here, there's a lot of talk, as you mentioned, about Griffith. There's a kind of weird jealousy triangle between Casca and Griffith and Guts.
And also, I think Casca and Griffith and Princess Charlotte, because she never says anything, not so far anyway, but she seems jealous of Charlotte. Yes. Because, Casca's jealous of anyone that's taking Griffith's attention, but I'm not sure if she's romantically interested in him. And meanwhile, Griffith has said, the translation is like, you will belong to me or you will be mine, he says to Guts, or something like that. Like, it's you can interpret it in a sexual or romantic way. And that scene with the water fight is, as I mentioned, homoerotic. It's hard to not read it that way. Yeah.
Now, will it go in that direction? I very much doubt it, but I think that's an element is there. There's an undertone there, which maybe Casca is kind of jealous about that as well. I don't know quite if she's romantically interested in Griffith or what, or she just wants him to herself as him being the leader. We don't know yet at this stage. But there's a lot of talk about it, in a sense, and there's a lot of, like, long looks like her looking at him in silent panels, looking back and forth, looking who's talking to who, this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about in our first Berserk episode how it sort of seems like the first couple of volumes were just there to attract readers, and this is the real story. And I think that's probably why it's got so much stuff in it that doesn't seem to have any relevance to the first 2 volumes, because it's all the real story, and that was all just we can just forget about that maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Where so it doesn't seem like a flashback. It seems like it's the real story, and with all the palace intrigue and the various triangles and so forth.
Yeah, and we even get some of Casca's backstory, which in volume 6, which I was surprised by, because I was like, are we ever going to learn anything about this character? But it's really patient. Like, the structure of the story is patient, and that finally, we've seen this woman for a long time. We get all her emotions about her jealousy. We don't really know anything about her until much later down the line. And then even then, now, when we get her backstory, it seems like she looks at Griffith like maybe like a big brother figure, because he rescued her from this attacker, or maybe a father figure or something like that.
Well, we should say that I think Miura waited until Casca was ready to tell Guts, which was a while, and that's why it took so long to get her backstory, because she wasn't just going to tell the reader. She had to tell Guts.
We don't get and we don't get another flashback to her that's just like an omniscient third-person flashback. It's her. She tells it herself.
By the way, I was confused about something in Volume 6. So Princess Charlotte, who, by the way, as soon as I saw her, I felt like she's going to die. Maybe it's from reading Commandy, where every time Commandy meets a girl, she gets killed. But she tells Griffith that her mother died. And then, not very many pages later, the Queen shows up and Charlotte calls her mother. Was she a stepmother? Or?
I think so. Was it? I got a bit hooked on that moment, snagged on that moment as well. And I did think maybe she mentioned something about the king's new wife, or maybe I'm imagining it. There's a lot going on in these 2 volumes.
That's why we only did 2.
We were talking about trying to do 4 or something at one stage.
Yeah, like we did last time. But
and we may end up doing more in future episodes, more than 2. But this time, I mean, there was kind of a lot like that. And I did feel like maybe she said something about it being the second wife of the king.
Yeah, even though I read it twice, and I also read it way back before. I read 5 and 6 before we did our 1 through 4 episode. But I still don't remember any mention of that. We should mention, so getting back to Nosferatu Zod, the reason why Griffith and Guts survived that encounter was, again, the egg of the king.
Yes.
Because Zod saw that and thought, okay, this is where I check out, but we don't really know why yet. But he said to Guts, and I put this in my notes, if you can be said to be a true friend of this man, then take heed. When his ambition collapses, death will pay you a visit, a death you can never escape. So I guess there are deaths that you can escape, well, in comics anyway. So that's clearly some kind of foreshadowing of whatever it is that's going to happen that's going to lead to Griffith and the God Hand. But it's just sort of a tantalizing hint that doesn't really tell us much more than that.
No, and it would have been a nightmare to translate, because, I mean, what does ambition collapsing actually mean?
I have no idea.
We don't know what form is that going to take when it becomes literal, when it's realized. So it's a very difficult point. And I don't know what the state of the translation was. They might not have had future volumes to read ahead on or whatever. Even that's difficult, even if you want to do it. Tricky moment. But it was interesting because when Zod sees the Behelit and stops, okay, now we know that there's more going on here. We know that the Behelit well, we already know it opens dimensional portals, but now we know there are other beings and magical beings in this world that react to it, and it's part of something much bigger. And it, again, made me think about that traveling gypsy again, and why did this end up in Griffith's hands? Almost like it was led to him, because he's going to use it to take over the world or whatever his plan is. Or I can't remember what he says his ambition is, to become a king or have his own kingdom or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to have his own kingdom.
Yeah. So he becomes, as a knight, what's it called? The Hawk? The Party of the Hawk? Or
the Band of the Hawk.
The Band of the Hawk.
Yeah.
So
they're
mercenaries.
Within these 2 volumes, they go from being a mercenary group to being actually the army of the king, because Griffith somehow gets sort of promoted.
Yeah, so they just perform very well, and this is enough for the king to give them special notice, including allowing them to guard the king on the royal hunt, which normally is supposed to go to a certain a group of knights led by this guy. What was the name of the guy that was the head?
Let's see. It's in my notes.
He becomes
Julius.
Yes, he ends up in an antagonistic relationship with Griffith, because Griffith is rising. Griffith
has become a viscount.
Yes. And meanwhile, all these maybe before that, I think when he's injured in the hunt, Julius attempts to assassinate him through an assassin, but he survives it.
Because of the
Behelit
again, yeah.
Yeah. So again, there's some kind of fate magical workings happening there.
More coming up, but first a reminder to join us for 20th Century TV and music trivia quiz videos and more on our Patreon page. Patrons donating $4 a month or more get access to our podcasts on the first 50 issues of The Amazing Spider-Man. We'll soon be finishing the series, and we'll announce the next topic we'll be covering. But the only way to hear the podcast is to join us at patreon.com/geekoncomics for at least $4 a month. We look forward to hearing from you.
Are you addicted to classic TV shows? Did you spend the 80s sitting in front of the boob tube? Then join us for TV Tangents, where we examine television of the 20th century with barely any contemporary context. Visit Shout Engine, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, and look for TV Tangents.
So he's surrounded by all these court officials. Some of them apparently are there. This is according to Casca, I think. So some of them are there. They don't like him, but they're there to visit him. But some of them are thinking that he might rise up in the ranks, and they want to be on his good side. So they're kind of being obsequious towards him while he's laid up in bed. But yeah, so he ends up getting a title, an official title. This starts to drive Julius crazy. Then this Minister Foss was the one that suggested to Julius he should try to assassinate.
Yeah, just like him. It's dangerous on the hunt. A stray arrow could happen to hit him. It might have poison on the tip, and wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
That's what happens in Game of Thrones. That's exactly what happens to the king. He's on a hunt, and then there was an accident, quote unquote. So he's kind of rising up the ranks. And then Minister Foss tells Griffith that Julius was the one that tried to assassinate him.
Well, he figures it out. No,
he figured it out first. Anyway,
he figured it out, and then he was
looking at him. We don't know how he figured it out.
Well, he kind of explained it because he paid one of the maids to spy on somebody, and so the assassin was observed getting the poison from a certain place, and all this kind of detective work, and so then he sends Guts to kill Julius.
Oh, but before, when he was on the field, when he was shot with the arrow, he looked up the hill at Julius before the detective work.
Yeah, that's true. He saw him up there.
And he had a sense. He was staring at him specifically, and Julius was like, wait, was he looking at me or all of us up here on the hill? Because he seemed to be looking directly at him, as if he had some sense that he would be the one to worry about. And then Minister Foss, of course, kind of confirms that. But then he stares down Minister Foss from across the room as well, as if he knows that he's playing both sides or something like that.
Yeah. But when Guts goes to kill Julius, so he does, but then, Griffith has warned him that nobody should be able to see his face. That doesn't want to compromise the mission. He says it's completely different from fighting in a war. You have to cover your tracks. And so after he's killed Julius, then Julius's 13-year-old son walks in, and so Guts feels he has to kill him, and so the son, Adonis, his death is dragged out over 8 pages. It's just agonizing to read. The blood bleeding and
I didn't think he was going to kill him. I was shocked by that moment. That was a moment I actually, quote unquote, liked because it was really dramatic. Because I was not expecting him to kill the kid. I thought he was going to get out of it or leave the kid alive, and that would lead to more dramas of a different kind later on. But he straight up kills this 13-year-old kid. At this stage, we don't quite know how he feels about it.
Well, in some of the panels, he seemed to have a pretty shocked look on his face.
Yes, he does.
But I kind of wondered what that whole bit was doing there with the assassination and the return assassination. I'm not sure what that is leading to, if anything.
I think it's Guts. I'm not sure if it's leading to anything either, but my hunch is it is Guts crossing a line because he's never assassinated someone before. And Griffith tells him this isn't like fighting on a battlefield. It's a different thing. It's murder is what it is.
Yeah.
Which I guess, depending on your perspective on things, is different from killing someone on a battlefield. However you term these things.
Yeah.
So it's murder, and he murders a child, which we don't know that he's done that on the battlefield or not. So I have a feeling this might turn him into the more calloused person. It's like the first step of him turning into what we saw in Volume 1. Instead of that. Obviously, I think that the main thing that's going to turn him completely into an emotionless bastard is whatever happens with this relationship with Griffith and Griffith becoming a hell demon. But I think this is part of that journey.
Well, and also, the whole bit with the son, killing the son brought back to him memories of Gambino, his father figure who sold him out for sex to somebody else, and who Guts ended up killing. In Volume 4. I just reread Volume 4. I didn't go back to the first 3. So part of it was just kind of a reminder of Guts's past trauma.
Yeah. And he's still, and then he has a nightmare. There's actually a nightmare sequence, which was very difficult to parse because he's turning like I think it's his face on Nosferatu Zod appears in the nightmare, his own face, or am I misremembering this? It was all kind of messed up and confused, and Gambino's in the dream and all this kind of stuff as well. Yeah, so it's a lot going on. I can't remember when that dream happened. It must have been after the assassination when all that stuff was.
I believe it was when Guts was escaping and he fell in the water in the sewer or something.
Yes, right.
And he seemed to be sort of unconscious, but he had this dream.
By the way, he falls off cliffs like a lot.
Is that the Berserk drinking game?
Yeah.
Like Commander getting knocked out.
It seems to happen more than like you'd expect, to the point where he's almost used to.
Right, there was the comedy scene where the door knocked him off the ledge, and then at the end of Volume 6 when Casca passes out and falls off a cliff, and he goes with her and to protect her, and they fall in the river. And
even didn't he fall in the river like when after he was killed Gambino or whatever, or at some point when he fought the wolves. At some point he falls off I felt like he was on a cliff edge and he fell off.
Yeah, that happened in Volume 4 when he was running from Gambino's men, I think, and he went off the cliff. Yeah, and I believe he landed in water that time. Otherwise, he'd be dead.
Yes.
So it happens a lot.
Okay, so in volume 6, I'm getting 5 and 6 a bit confused here. So this is where we get the assassination. We get the dream about Zod. Actually, I want to find that sequence because we'll try to parse it out because I really had trouble interpreting it. And I feel like Miura wants us to interpret the dream.
So, so he's escaped from the castle. He's, killed some guards, too, as he was escaping. And then, he falls in a sewer. And I'm not sure what's happening here. Like, it's really cold. No, he hits his head on a rock, it looks like.
Okay, right.
And then he doesn't drown, obviously, but he's semi-conscious, I guess. And, he's dreaming that he's sword fighting with Gambino. And then Nosferatu Zod shows up and hacks off Gambino's head, and it's Guts as a kid again here, and then Zod stabs him also, and then Zod is laughing, but
then Zod seems to have Guts' face.
It's a little hard to tell because it's still Zod with the big horns and everything, but it seems like it's. I guess Guts is kind of thinking now he's as bad as Zod, maybe. Yeah,
or maybe he's killed his younger self by killing this kid. Mm-hmm. In a sense that whatever modicum of innocence was left in him is now gone completely, maybe, is what it means. Then we get Griffith kind of charming the princess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's out. She has to have a party because it's required of her, but she doesn't really like it, and she's outside by the fountain with Griffith, and of course Guts has just done this assassination, and he's looking for Griffith, and Casca tries to stop him from embarrassing. She's doing this a lot throughout these volumes, trying to keep him from embarrassing Griffith.
Yeah, because Griffith is real, like, salt of the earth type. Or no, Guts is real. He's really, like, rough. And he doesn't care about propriety or cultural class or all those etiquette or all those things. Mm-hmm. He wants to visit Griffith when he's bedridden, and Casca has to try to stop him, etc. It's again and again, she has to try to hold him back. But then the news comes that Julius and his son have been killed in their castle. They think it was a burglar that did it. But Griffith hears this news, and you get a great large splash panel where he's got this evil grin on his face as he hears. And I assumed he was going to be angry about Adonis, the son, being killed. But he's actually seems pleased. Doesn't look upset about it at all. He's just got that evil smile on his face.
Yeah, and Casca seems to be putting together what Guts is doing there, what Guts has just done. By the way, before the news comes about the assassinations, there's this long conversation of Griffith and Charlotte where I couldn't quite follow what he was talking about. Like about his dreams.
Yeah. Because it's long.
What a friend is to him.
Yes. We never had any of this in volumes 1 and 2. This kind of introspective, what are my hopes and dreams? And he's very articulate about them, I guess, even though he talks a lot. It's hard to, in the end, understand everything he said, because he just went on and on. It's much like that line about when your ambition collapsing. Like, what does that mean? And to me, he says, to me, a friend is someone who would never depend upon another's dream, someone who wouldn't be compelled by anyone, but would determine to pursue his own reason to live. And should anyone trample that dream, he would oppose him body and soul, even if the threat were me, myself. Why would that be your friend? That's just that person. Okay, so you want a person who doesn't
follow that.
Yeah, so to you, a friend is someone who doesn't rely on other people and follows their dream and doesn't ever give up on it. Well, what does that have to do with the friendship? It's so weird. It's become very manga-esque, I would say, in this volume.
Yeah.
But we get some interesting stuff in here, like, see again, so we get this. They're going into another battle. I can't remember which. Who? Very hard to remember who's fighting who or why they're. I think they're part of the army. They're fighting other nations. Whatever. There's a great moment, page 164, where Casca is in her armor, sitting on her horse, and we get a silent panel of her putting her hand on her belly, and then in the next panel she has a thought balloon that says, "At a time like this, ellipses, ... And I was like, oh, she's got her period. And I thought that was great. It was such a subtle thing, but then it becomes the whole chapter. Like, it becomes the whole point. I was like, that was kind of a bummer. Like, I loved how subtle this was. Because I was like, okay, I see what's happening here. But then it actually becomes this drawn-out thing where she's completely naked. We haven't had a nude scene, I don't think, from her earlier.
In volume.
Oh no, she had slept with him.
When
he had hypothermia.
Yeah, Guts was so cold that she was made to warm him up. I mean, it didn't seem like anything actually happened there, but we did see her naked there.
Apparently, that is how you cure hypothermia: is two people have to like sleep in the same bed, like together, skin to skin. So yeah, nothing happened. He was unconscious.
Yeah.
And this was a bit like, even the chapter title page, 181, is her taking off her armor and she's naked underneath. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense anyway. Well, why are we doing this? This is fan service. Which we haven't had to deal with in this series.
Yeah, I just kept thinking about that too, because like for what was going on, like, you know, a character like Casca could really easily be used for fan service, and it doesn't happen. Oh wait,
yeah,
there's the fan service.
Bit of a bummer, yeah. And then it has to be literalized. The whole thing about her period, we have to actually get details about it and all this kind of stuff. And there's the awkwardness of her being naked and, you know, all this kind of dumb stuff. And then we get her backstory. But I did like, so then we get some Berserk weirdness happening. They fight this group called the Blue Whale Ultra Heavy Armored Fierce Assault Annihilation Night Corps, which I love to death. I was like, so what's happened is this translator has to translate each and every kanji as a full word, and that's what we've ended up with. And I love that. And for some reason, he has a special move, which we're given in Japanese as Ganzan Senpu. And I really wondered about that translation choice. I was like, we're going to translate Blue Whale Ultra Heavy Armored Fierce Assault Annihilation Night Corps, but not Ganzan Senpu.
Yeah, they just put it in Nomaji and then a footnote explaining what it meant in Japanese.
Why? Yeah, well, just give it to us. It was a bit of an odd choice.
Yeah. But yeah, so they're having this battle, and because she's having her period, she's not at full strength, and she does, you know, then she faints and falls off the cliff, as I mentioned, and turns out she's got a really high fever.
Yeah.
And Guts has to swim in his armor after they land in the river.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we get the backstory of how she met Griffith and how he rescued her. She was from a very poor village. She also seems, I was a bit surprised at her age, in the sense that Guts was found at birth, literally moments after he was born, and raised as a warrior, and that's why he's as good as he is. Well, I can't remember how old she is, 9 or 10? Seems a bit old to be a Jedi.
She was 12, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Too old. He's too old to become a Jedi. Because she's like a super warrior. By the time we meet her, almost not at Griffith's level, maybe not at Guts' level, but she's high up there. She's one of the top Hawks. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, because how old is she now? Maybe 16, 17, 18?
Yeah, we don't know how many years have gone by, but
yeah.
Well, now being in the flashback.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and then that's pretty much the end of this volume.
Yeah, very curious. Again, I felt it was like weaker than the first 4, but there were moments in there, like whenever the Bahamut seemed to have some effect, or when we get the Blue Whale Ultra Heavy Armored Fierce Assault Annihilation Night Corps, or something like that. Then I'm like, okay, this is some interesting stuff going on, but I feel like we're off track, and maybe we're going to get back on track again. very interesting. I think just a week or two ago, there was an episode of Cartoonist Kayfabe on YouTube about Berserk, and they read Volume 1, and they're like, well, we don't see the appeal. When does it get good? And I'm like, well, it gets good, like, in Volume 2. And then now I'm like, wait a second, so Volume 5, we're kind of having a dip again. But maybe it's going to come back. I think the magic is maybe what's going to do it. I think we're missing part of it is just missing those designs, the crazy designs, and the crazy things that can happen. Like, we had that guy was cut off, his face was cut off, and we just had his face just like a puddle that was talking for a whole volume. That's amazing, and we don't have anything on that level happening here, and I'm kind of like, that. I'd rather have that than a long speech about how friendship means one person never gives up their dreams, even if you try to stop them. I mean, well, we've seen those kinds of speeches before, and I feel like even if some of that stuff in Volumes 1 and 2 is derivative, it was done in a very unique way and beautifully drawn. Still beautifully drawn, but something's just a bit missing here.
Mm-hmm. I had a complaint about the translation.
Okay.
So we've got all these like court nobles, and royalty and whatever, and sometimes some of the things they say sound kind of too modern or too relaxed. Like a number of times they say what? And it just didn't seem to fit at all.
Yeah, say what. I noted say what as well. It should have been come again. Yeah, it's that kind of stuff is very tricky as a translator. Especially if you're trying to sound highfalutin, very difficult to do, I find. And sometimes it's hard to find the right expression. Sometimes you just don't remember something like come again instead of say what. Or just what would have worked better, or what did you say or something like that. But sometimes it's sometimes the Japanese might have been clumsy, like the dialogue might have been clumsy. So sometimes you don't want to change what you've got. And Miura might not have been the best at dialogue. In fact, I had some suspicions here that's not really his greatest strength. Just based on the translation, I think all his strengths are in the design work and the structure and the pacing and the pages, like the page design. I think all that kind of stuff is great.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, there were some other places where it just felt a little awkward.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay, well, I don't know that I have anything else to say about these.
Okay,
two.
yeah, no, I don't really, but I am still looking forward to the next 4 or 2 or 4, however many we do, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm interested. I mean, it's going to take a while, but I'm interested in seeing how it gets.
So, did you say there were
present? I think I said
did you say there were 14 volumes?
I think that's what I said last time. I did listen to that episode.
Moly.
I think it's like 14 volumes of flashback.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Berserk by Kentaro Miura is published in English by Dark Horse. If you're enjoying our weekly comics talk, consider supporting this podcast by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode there, or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. That's also the address for submitting your own comics work for possible inclusion on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Next week, another of our MCU movie reviews. Mulele, Paul, and I discuss 2018's Black Panther. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.